these parents, why don't you move to a slum? You'd save on rent, and the kids are never seeing the outside anyway. You're taking them back and forth. Why did you move here to do this? To do this to your kids? There's no kids in the parks. There's no kids playing on the street, and there's no kids walking to school. So what's the difference where you live? But what did I realize, is that this fear is so pervasive that we cannot think of our children as ever being safe. And so I started hearing other samples of this happening in real life. Like the Girl Scouts are allowed now they can still toast a marshmallow, but they have to have one knee on the ground. And I must demonstrate this, okay? Why? So they don't fall into the flames, immolate themselves. Girl Scouts around the country. Oh, I'm from St. Joan of Arc troop. Oh, well, I understand. Boy Scouts. I heard from the mom of a Cub Scout who said that a guy came to oh my God, a Cub Scout leader. How did they even let him in? A guy came to her troop, and he was showing the kids, demonstrating how to whittle, which involves a knife, right? And so the kids were all interested, and so afterwards he gave them each, I guess, a piece of wood and a potato peeler. Potato peeler. And I keep imagining like our proud Native American forebears is like, God, I've been like working on this totem pole for 7 years. I'm getting nowhere. I mean, I can't even make a nose. So, but because middle-aged people tend to think back very fondly and sometimes falsely on just, the halcyon days of their childhood, I really wanted to find proof that things had gotten so different, that our parents really were different from the parents of today. And I think I did find my smoking gun, and there it is now. Call it. No, it's okay. Please turn off your phones. What I found was this double DVD set called Sesame Street Old School. And it's highlights of Sesame Street from 69 to 74, which is the first 5 years it was on. 5 years, she can count. 5 years that it was on the air. And it shows things like kids playing follow the leader, and the leader does not have a PhD in child development. It's a 5-year-old, right? Or you see them playing in a vacant lot, and they balance on a piece of wood, and they shimmy their way through one of those giant pipes that's on the ground. It's a straight shot. There's like no homeless guy in the middle. Clearly not shot in New York. And there's nobody supervising them, and they're just having the time of their lives, kind of time that we all remember. And before you see any of this, at the very beginning of the DVD, something appears on the screen, and it's a warning that says, you know this? Warning, the following is intended for adult viewing only and may not be suitable for younger viewers, right? Like it's porn. Yeah. And then when I'm thinking about this crowd, it's for adult viewers. That's a little odd too, isn't it? Sesame Street is for adult viewers. But anyways, the point being that somehow we think that the very childhood that was endorsed by the child development experts and public television and educators and a plethora of people all concerned about children just a generation ago is now considered so foolhardy that they can't even endorse it themselves. So I'm a reporter, or I was, and so I wanted to find out, how did we become so afraid all the time? And I did my research, and I came up with what I think are 4 reasons that we are obsessed with the worst case scenario. And I'll tell you what they are. How about that? Yes? Okay. First, we have to blame who? Who do we always blame? Come on, who do we always blame? Oh, I guess this is media. Thank you. Yes, exactly right. We blame the media because the media is to blame. The media is terrible. The media is obsessed with predator stories, and that's why we all know the names of JC and Kaylee and Maddie, which to me always says, don't name your child with 2 E's at the end of her name, because that's the ones they want. But that's a bad taste joke. But the point is that these are the stories that make money for the networks, because if you have the story of a white middle-class kid who has been abducted, you will always have fodder for viewers. People will always be tuning in. Have any of you heard the name Maddie McCann. Anybody know the name Maddie McCann? A lot of nodding. Okay, she was the girl who was taken from her hotel room in Portugal. Okay, all right, pop quiz, okay? Can any of you tell me anything that has happened in Portugal in the last 500 years? Does it have a king? What do they export? What are they doing there? Do they have, I don't even know how they did in the World Cup. There's no story out of Portugal that is important except for this one incident. And I think of how Columbus came to America searching for saffron, okay? It was tiny, golden, valuable. It was worth coming across the ocean for one thing, this spice. And that's the only reason we send our camera crews across the ocean, because that is the most valuable. It's tiny, it's extremely rare, and we all know the name, because that's the show, that's the story that we hear over and over on TV. And when you hear about something 24/7, you turn on TV, there's another kidnapped kid, it starts feeling like that's happening in real life. Did you know that ABC appointed Elizabeth Smart to be their kidnapped child correspondent? This is a crowd that probably knows that. But so that means, let's see, there's news, weather, sports, and kidnapped children. Those are the main staples. It's like, oh, we have a cold front coming in, and Elizabeth, do we have any kidnapped children today? Oh, yes, Jim, we have. It's just become part of the fabric of everyday life. And so the news is bad, and then, I just wanted to show you one example, then the stories get recycled, reiterated, remade worse, I'm sure there's a word for that, on the drama shows. So a couple years ago, somebody wrote to my site and said, Lenore, have you watched Law and Order last night? Law and Order, yeah, you guys must love Law and Order, right? And I said, no. And she said, well, go watch last night's episode. So that meant, Maury, how do I download for free the last night's episode? Because I have no idea, so I asked my son. Somehow he did something illegal, and there pops up Law and Order, and every damn episode of Lost. But he can't get me Silicon Valley yet. I don't know. His skills are slipping. And so the story was of, guess what? It was a 9-year-old boy who was telling his mom, Mom, can I please ride the subway by myself? Right? Yeah. And the mother looks at him and his chubby cheeks, and she loves him so much, and she has to be ethnic, but she can't be exactly like me. I'm Jewish, so she's a gypsy. And she says, oh, my son, I'm so worried, but Mom, I'll be fine. Like anyone's ever fine on Law and Order. It's like, so long as you're not on Law and Order, you'll be fine, but you are. No, so she has been knitting him a pair of mittens. Okay, so guess what? He actually takes the subway and gets to school safely. Does he get home? Of course not. What is on the ground? And I did this once, and people said the arm. I'm like, no, not the arm. Sorry, what I mean is, how do you, the mitten. The mitten is on the ground. And actually, this is a crowd who might like this. You know who killed him? It wasn't anybody here. It was the other fear. Bullies! Bullies, of course, kidnapped, tortured him with cigarette burns all over his body, and then murdered him. Beautiful blonde bullies, so that they could put the beautiful blonde kids in their short little skirts on TV. Anyways, and why did they kill him? Because the script said to. But here, let me just show you something kind of amazing about that episode and why we start thinking the worst first, even in cases that nothing bad happened, like with my son. This is the kid who was on the Law and Order episode. Someday I'll figure out how to do a PowerPoint. And then, oh, there's my son. How do you like? I guess it's a coincidence. Isn't that amazing? Even my son, usually can't recognize that somebody looks like you. Even my son said, wow! Like, I'm dead? No, you're not dead. Okay. The other one's the smart one. Anyway, so, shh, cut that out. They both have their own strengths and weaknesses. So a second reason that we're so afraid is that this will be seen by my son someday. Second reason is that we're afraid because we have expert culture. There are experts telling us everything that we have to worry about for our kids. And I've tailored this one to this particular audience. Here's an excerpt from Parents Magazine, the Bible of child rearing. part of their play date playbook, because, play dates are so hard. If only somebody would help me figure out how to have a play date for my child, which children used to do on their own, then I would be really grateful. So here's the question, the situation. You've accepted a sleepover invite for your daughter, not realizing, dun, 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 only her pal's divorced dad will be at home. You're not okay with it. What do you do? What do you do? Here's what their solution is. I'll tell you what I would do. I would burn my parents' magazine subscription. But they say, call and say, I'm sorry, and this is about me, not you, you hideous pervert. They didn't put that in. But I just don't feel comfortable with a man supervising an overnighter. Offer to host the girls at your own place instead. What, like your husband isn't one? And if you can, or ask to turn the sleepover into a late over where your daughter comes home late. No, it's a joke, didn't work. A late over where your daughter stays only until bedtime. Okay, so what they're basically saying is, if there's a man anywhere near a child and there isn't a wife handcuffed to him, then probably he will instantly turn into a child-raping predator, and your kid will come home sadder and wiser, never to be the same. Well, that's kind of terrible advice, I would say, and it also reinforces the idea that children around men always means the worst. You should always, once again, what we were talking about at the beginning, imagine your child dead. Okay, here's another book that everybody praises to me, and it drives me crazy because they should be reading my book, not this book, but they say, oh, Lenore, I'll read your book someday. But in the meantime, I read Gavin de Becker's, what is it called? Protecting the Gift. And so people always are sending this to me. And so here are the things that you should just ask yourself when you're trying to decide if your kid should go out and walk to school or play or whatever. Lighthearted questions like, are you, as the parent, strong enough to hear about any experience your child has had, no matter how unpleasant? Does your child know it's okay to rebuff and defy adults? Which I think is a good question to ask, but just the idea of this always going through your mind before your kid goes outside. And finally, does your child know how to describe his peril? Okay? This is just a little checklist, okay, before they're going out. It's like, gee, maybe I'll put him back in the pumpkin instead. Because why would you ever let your kid out into the real world? So here's what Dear Abby says, okay? If your kid is going out and maybe they're going someplace new or you're going off to someplace you haven't been before, just before they go out the door, take a picture. Take a picture of your child before. Why? Because you looked so cute. I mean, look so cute in that striped shirt that I'll always remember, and it'll be in the paper. But yeah, go have a great time, hon. Yeah, I hope you have fun because it'll be your last. So the idea of even Dear Abby telling you to think in these terms, Dear Abby, it was either her or Ann Landers who had an article once on tips for when your child is going into the men's room by himself. It's like tips for when your child is going to the NAMBLA convention. I mean, it really, it's like, give them a walkie-talkie. It's like, what does that sound I hear? You don't know, but you're grunting, Mom, or talk to him through the door. How you doing? Just taking it out, Mom. I mean, and if there's ever a pause in the conversation, rush in there and save him, or go in there first with your flashlight and your Uzi and make sure there's no man in there, and announce that you're coming in, or don't announce that you're coming in, because it's your right to protect your child. So there's all this advice out there. Will your child describe his peril? Are you going to take his picture first? Is there going to be a man anywhere within 50 feet? Don't let them out. So the expert culture and the guise of keeping your kids safe is really keeping you, the parent, paranoid. Third thing that's driving us crazy is what I call the safety industrial complex. I brought a couple examples. Including one just for this crowd, but not the first. Oh, God. My sample bag is becoming like my purse. You can't find anything. Okay, what are these? This is a crowd that won't actually know. Leg warmers. That's I say it's like a shill. It's like, no, they're not leg warmers. That's the 1980s, but close. Right. Leg warmers? Huh? Oh, yeah. Huh? Wine holders. That's forget the sweet tea. I'm going home with her. Right. Armbands. We shall overcome. No. They're not armbands. But these are, you're a great audience because you don't know. These are, right. Derek, was that you? Did you read my book?
Yes, I read your book.
See, that's what we shall see. You'll all know if you read the book, which you're going to read when you leave. Okay, these are not Gavin Becker, and not the Daily News. So these are protective baby knee pads for when they're crawling, okay? Because you decorated the nursery in crushed glass. You know, it's a bad idea, right? So you put these on your baby because there hasn't been anything like evolution for the last 2 million years giving those babies their chubby little knees that allow them to crawl on the ground. Actually, one lady wrote to the site that sells these, which is Safety First, or I can't remember the name of it. I think it is Safety First. And she said that these were really great because they helped her kid make the difficult transition from carpet to floor, right? You're like, that kid's going far. So the other thing about these is that, in a way, don't you want the floor to sort of be uncomfortable and chafe your child's knees? Do you want your kid down there? It's like, Mom, can I have a beer? You want them to fall. There's a reason that we didn't need these for all these years, and we still don't need these. But they are sold nonetheless. These are table toppers. What are table toppers? Table toppers are disposable placemats made by our friends at Disney, who would never make anything you didn't absolutely need. And they are eco-friendly, except for the fact that they exist. And they stick in place. They're perfect for restaurants. What do you use them for? Here's what it says. Table toppers provide on-the-go protection from germs, dirt, and cleaning chemicals on restaurant and food court tables. Wait a minute. So they provide protection from germs, dirt, and cleaning chemicals. So basically, if you go into the food court and there's yesterday's taco salad is fused to the formica and you need to use your knife to get it off, thank God you have your table topper. But God forbid somebody came through and cleaned the table and it is gleaming, your child is still in danger. So what they're telling you is basically your child is in danger every single second of the day. Nothing is safe enough for your child. And here's one more example. You guys won't know what this is either. The women, let's just the guys answer. The guys with gray hair, let's have them answer. What is this, guys? Rubber ducky. Ha ha ha. Who said that? Yeah, are you a guy with gray hair? No. All right, my mistake. She's in disguise. Witness protection. This, in fact, is the baby bathwater temperature duck. Okay? This is, you place this in your baby's bath, you wait a few minutes, and when you pull it out, if the word hot appears on the bottom, then you know that the water is, what's that thing it's warm, it's uncomfortable when it's boiling? What? It's hot. That's right, the water is hot, because you couldn't possibly put your hand in the water, and if you pull it out and there's like only bones are left, and there's something in the water and it's swirling and it smells like soup maybe, but sort of like you. No, you couldn't possibly do that because you are too stupid to protect your own child, because everything, remember, is out to get them and you are not equipped to save them. But, John, can you read small print?
Maybe.
Okay. Why don't you come up here for 1 second? I want you to read just the sentence under caution that begins adult. Just read me that sentence.
Adult should always place hand in bathwater to test the temperature before placing baby in tub.
Whoa! So what is this duck doing? What are you saying? Early warning system that you are out. I'd say it's worse than that. I'd say this duck is screwing with your mind, okay? Because it is trying to make you think like, gee, I guess I don't know what hot water is. Have I ever taken a bath? How would I know? It's trying to make you, it's undermining any confidence we have in our own common sense, in our own experience. As is this, your child is going to die from eating off of a table that isn't your own. As are these, your child can't possibly crawl. Nobody has ever done it in the history of the universe. So all these things are making us really second guess our own smarts as well as our children's survivability. But the one I brought just for you tonight, because it's actually too disturbing for my other audiences, but I thought maybe you could take it. Is this. Maybe not. Maybe you're the worst person. But you know what this is? This is sold on the internet, and of course I had to buy one. What are these? These are tooth prints. Have you seen tooth prints? Tooth prints are so nice. It's a great stocking stuffer. You buy this, and you take it home, soften and bite. You soften this, and you have your child come here, after you've taken their picture for the day, of course, come here and bite it. Why? So when they find the mangled body that is decayed beyond recognition, lucky you! You have their dental records to identify the body. So that's why I always say I don't blame parents for being so seemingly crazy, overprotective, paranoid, nut jobs, because when you're living in a society that's telling you can't figure out the temperature of your own kid's water and your kid can't survive a single germ, and by the way, just have these forensic items on hand along with a little DNA swab so that they can identify the decayed remains of your beloved child, you're gonna go crazy, okay? So it's a society that is shoving this fear down our throats. But that was just number 3. Then the fourth thing that is driving us crazy is the whole, I couldn't decide whether I should call this politics, politicians, lawmakers, cops, or prosecutors. So let's assume I'm calling it all that, okay? Because I'll just put it under the rubric of laws and the people who make them and enforce them, okay? Because I think this is the part that you guys know a lot better than me, that under that rubric we have, first of all, prosecutors. I was talking to a lawyer friend the other day, and I was telling him I'm going to go talk to this group, and I'm really mad at the sex offender laws. And he said, oh, yeah, sometimes they're crazy. He told me about a case he had where a man was at a mall. He saw his ex across the way. So he came up, and he patted her on the rear. And surprise was, that wasn't his ex. Funny, right? A stupid little, oh, my God, how embarrassing. How embarrassing? Yeah, except that he was then prosecuted for a sex crime, okay? Because as, I don't know if it was the judge or the prosecutor put it, either you were trying to get her off or you were trying, I don't know why I go to this Texas accent, either you were trying to get her off or you were trying to get off, and either way, that's sexual contact and therefore a crime. And the way the lawyer described it to me, which is the way actually, John, you were describing it to me last night too, is that what we have here is an issue of what are we going to define as a sex crime? Because if you say, I was a prosecutor last year and I'm running for the district attorney and I put 150 sex criminals behind bars last year, vote for me, and the next person gets up and says, well, I was brought 150 sex crime cases last year, and after investigating them, I found 12 that indicated a danger to children, and I am prosecuting those. Who's going to win? Right? It's like, why would you? It's 150 versus 12. And so until we educate more people about the fact that this 150 is a corrupt and vile, ridiculous idea of what actually constitutes a sex crime, there's every incentive for a nefarious prosecutor to go after anybody who gets caught in his web. So part of the problem is prosecutors. Then there's cops. And this is when I have to give a shout out to Mary Duval. And I know she's dead, but I still want to give her a round of applause because she's the one who found me. I was writing, gee, I wonder why people are so scared, and talking about all the different permutations on how this fear is infiltrating parenting. And she called me up one day and said, have you ever thought about the sex offender list? I'm like, yes, I'm terrified. And she's like, let's talk. And she gradually educated me to the idea that this list is filled with people who pose no threat to children, and also when you've served your time, why is there still a registry? There's no murderers registry. She just pulled me through all this education, and I really had the pleasure of meeting her when she came to New York to do the Stossel show a couple of years ago, and she was blind. And so I took her on a smelling tour of New York, which is really easy, frankly. But I took her to nice places. I took her to a cool perfume store. I took her to Central Park, Chinatown. Chinatown was really smelly. Anyways, one of the things that she explained to me is, what I'll explain to you and that I try to explain to people now, is one of the things that's wrong with the cops in this equation is that now we have, and I have to read this because it's a little hard even for me, it's like an algebra program. So we have middle-aged cops pretending to be underage teens who pretended to be older teens to get onto sites where they wouldn't be allowed if they really were underage teens, but would be allowed if they were middle-aged cops, which they're saying they aren't, but they are, okay? You got that, right? Okay. And then they, the good guys, pretend to be underage teens eager to have sex with guys exactly like them who are the bad guys, and then they lure them in because those guys, not the first guys, the second guys, not the good guys, the bad guys, are perverts. And then, well, the cops get to pretend to be a 14-year-old pretending to be an 18-year-old. The guy who went to the adult site as an adult is charged with soliciting somebody underage who's 43. Okay? She explained this whole thing to me about the idea of cops pretending to be all those 14-year-olds who are so eager for paunchy middle-aged guys to go to bed with, because there's certainly nobody their age who would ever be interested in them. She explained all that to me, and that was very enlightening. So that's the problem with cops. The problem with lawmakers. Lawmakers pass laws for the vote. No, what are they saying? I'm thinking about the public safety. I'm thinking about they're small. The children! Won't you think about the children, please? And then once they've passed a law to protect the children, then they need a harsher law to show that they care more about their children and more about them, until finally you get such arcane minutia becoming a crime that I'll tell you what happened to me yesterday, okay? So I was contacted by Josh Gravens, who is here. He was there. He's been abducted! Right. You know, it happens all the time. I turn my head away, and he wasn't there. Anyways, Josh, wherever he may be, and I hope he's safe, called me before I got here, and he's a Soros fellow. You know, George Soros, Open Society. He's the Soros fellow who is tasked with showing the world just how crazy the sex offender laws are, as well as the registry. And he has been on the registry since he was 12. He's 27 now, married with kids. And he said, come with me. I actually have to register when you're here because I'm changing houses. So come with me and you'll get to see what the registry is. And I'm a reporter. Remember, I was. And, and so I said, oh, that'd be fun. I didn't mean fun. Okay, I know it's not fun. Interesting. So I went with him to the registry, which is wherever I am in Dallas. It's right at the police headquarters. And we go in. And then he's called in, and all he's doing is registering the fact that he's moving houses. And he's very polite, and it's quiet, and I'm surprised they let me come in. You know, he said, that's my reporter, and they said, okay. You know, like, everyone should have a reporter with them all the time, although you'll see how little it helped. So Josh is done, and we're thinking, oh, we'll go for lunch. Where are we going to go? You know, barbecue, Dallas, et cetera. And then another man came up and said, Joshua Gravens? And he said, yes. He said, you're under arrest. And I was like, is this like pranking me? And it wasn't. He got out real handcuffs. I've never seen a friend of mine put in handcuffs before. Josh had to put his hands behind his back, and then they tighten them. I didn't know that went on. And Josh was like, what's this for? And he said, failure to register a change of address. And Josh said, I'm here registering the change of address. And he said, you didn't tell us beforehand. And Joshua said, because he knows the rules, and I know, and he said, well, what about section blah, 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 subset blah, blah, blah? You know, it says that I have to register within 7 days of moving. And he said 7 days before as well. And Joshua said, I think you're mistaken. He said, I have an order to arrest you. Come with me. And he took Josh, and he took a woman who was crying, and I'd heard her in the booth next to ours, who'd given her address wrong. She said, I'm at this hotel. And the cops had gone to the hotel, and she wasn't registered at the hotel. She said, because I'm living in my car. Okay, I'm living in my car in front of the hotel. I was there. Doesn't matter. So she's crying. She's getting in the car. Josh is getting in the car. Gives me his glasses, car keys. I don't drive. And off he goes. And that to me was an introduction to what it means to live on the registry. You can be doing absolutely everything right. You could get to the point where you are not only educated and articulate, brilliant and charming, and about to take me out to lunch, and still miss one appointment or misunderstand one tiny, niggling, stupid rule that doesn't make anyone one iota safer, that some politician said, let's make them register before they move instead of just after. And it becomes a law. And what I heard when I was talking to John and when I was talking, and actually even before that when I'd been talking to Josh about the sex offender registry, is that that's not going to go down as like stupid error or dumb mistake or minor misdemeanor. It can be considered as a felony. Yeah, thank you for the word. A felony. It can be actually considered the same as your original offense, right? So you have a person who's, married, children, out, exemplary life, and it's as if he has just violated an 8-year-old, okay? So that's outrageous. That's why I'm so happy that excuse me, the Dallas Morning News is here. That's why I'm so happy I'm here. These are the stories that have to get out because people don't realize how absurd the list is. But the thing that I find hopeful is that absurdity, that kind of absurdity, is actually our friend. And I have to take you on one little detour to get to why I think that this is going to help us in the long run. Do you remember a couple months ago? No, actually it was over a year ago now. There was a boy who was eating breakfast at school, and he had a Pop-Tart, and he went like this, and he was expelled for a gun, right? Because he had gnawed his Pop-Tart. They call it a toaster pastry in the news. He had gnawed his toaster pastry, I guess it was off-brand, into the shape of a gun. He said he was trying to make it into a mountain. Who knows? It doesn't really matter what he was trying to make it into. He couldn't make it into a gun. I think we all agree that a toaster pastry, off-brand or not, is not a gun, and yet he was expelled. And that incident took over pop culture. It became a punchline. It was on every website. It became the symbol of how stupid zero-tolerance laws have become. And until then, I had been listing all of them as they came along. The first grader who brought his spork to school from Boy Scouts, but because it was not just a spoon and a fork, it also had a little cutting edge on it. That was a knife, and he was sent to reform school with the grown-up kids for 45 days. Or there was a kid who brought a Lego gun. There was a kid who brought one of those little Weebles wobble, and they don't fall down. Yeah, but they get you arrested because the little Weeble had a little gun. Josh is back! It's a miracle! Yay! Not that you missed anything, Josh. Nothing important. Somebody will fill you in. Anyways, the point is there have been a lot of silly zero-tolerance incidents in the country, and they do get a certain amount of traction, but the Pop-Tart gun was so glaringly ridiculous and the administrator so obviously a moron that it became symbolic, and it's an easy reference point. And in fact, since then, 2 states have written into the state law that you are specifically allowed to carry a Pop-Tart gun to school. I'm packing a heatable pastry. Heatable pastry, yeah. So what I think is that, Josh's story, as good as it is, and it's on Reason.com right now, I hope, or else I was up till 2 a.m. for nothing. We have a story that I think is going to serve us just as well. And that is, 2 weeks ago, I'm sure you all know this story. There was a 15-year-old, and she sent a sexy text. I guess a sext. Let's just call it sext. I guess that's what they do. Sent a sext to her 17-year-old boyfriend, who sent back a sext to her. What a surprise, as opposed to thank you very much for your correspondence. Right. I don't want to open that. So he sent one back. The mom sees it, calls the cops. Cops come. They arrest him. They take a picture of him naked, but that's not good enough. Right? That's not good enough. They want to take him to the hospital and inject him with a drug that will give him an erection, which I always thought was beer, and take a picture. Okay? So now you have a boy arrested for making child porn, but the cops are going to take him, make it big, and take a picture of him. He's still underage, and that's not child porn. They're not the perverts. Well, everybody can see they are the perverts. This is ridiculous. And I think in this we have a real gift, because I think that case is the Pop-Tart gun for the reform the sex offender laws. When it gets so absurd that the whole country goes, wait a minute, what are we saying is wrong? And then you start dialing back. It's like, well, aren't 15-year-olds supposed to be with 17-year-olds? And it just starts making everything look a little shakier than it was before. So in the end, it was all the publicity about the case that made, well, I'll read you my headline from my site, which was, cops who were going to give 17-year-old an erection decide to beat it. What can you... So, impossible to read. There were so many alternative headlines, too. I come from the tabloid world. So my point is that we have our Pop-Tart gun, and we can use it as a wedge to start pointing out the absurdity and then eventually the unfairness and the gross indecency of, so to speak, of our sex offender laws. We have to use these opportunities to do what? To highlight their absurdity, to point out that we're spending so much money on laws and on surveying people and keeping people under lock and key who pose zero threat to children. They're hurting families. They're hurting the people who are incarcerated. They're wasting cops' time, taking them away from the real criminals. And, oh, by the way, they're not making kids any safer. So, that's what I wanted to end on, which was just basically that eventually the sex offender laws could become, the public can turn and start seeing the laws as flawed and frankly ridiculous as the zero tolerance laws are. Now everybody immediately says zero tolerance, that's so stupid. I'm hoping that will happen soon enough with the sex offender laws as they are written today, because after all, eventually our country has gotten over all of its crazy fears that grip it for a while. We've had a witch scare, a comic scare, a commie scare, which was at the same time, video game scare, and a satanic daycare scare, which is hard to say. And somewhere, someone was truly freaked out by an L-shaped Pop-Tart. Okay, so I believe that in the end, the truth will out. And I said at the beginning, I feel like I'm in a room with abolitionists. I believe that we shall overcome. And if that requires making some stupid puns and references to a 17-year-old and his erection, well, go big or go home. And I say, go big. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lenore. Well, I think we'll have just time for a few questions here before we go to the workshops. Brenda, do you have some there that you want to read?
Sure. Let's see, I'll just sort of take these in whatever order.
Give me the easy ones, because we only have
Yeah,
a few minutes.
sure. You're still recording, okay.
Oh.
Yeah, the question here is, okay, yeah, you do the first pitch, I'll just say, okay, what's your website
Oh,
or
God.
blog called? You forgot.
Oh my God, have I not flogged my own self-interest? How bizarre. Website, Free Range Kids. Book, Free Range Kids. Twitter account, Free Range Kids. Friends. That's it, yeah, Free Range Kids. I'm really easy to find on the web. And I'm America's Worst Mom, as you know, so very easy to find.
Okay.
Was this? Oh, and it's my handwriting.
All right. Next question. How can somebody effectively counteract the likes of Nancy Grace on Fox News?
That's all I spend all my time doing, too. That's why I'm here. I believe that humor is effective. I believe stories are the way to go. If you can tell a story and you get people to understand that this is a person, and isn't this weird, and what if this was your kid? I mean, once you take people through someone's life who, well, here's what I wanted to do, okay? And I didn't do it, and I'll tell you why. Maybe somebody else will do this idea. I wanted to have a sex offender come and live with me and my sons, and my husband, for a week. And then I'd say, like, tomorrow I'm talking about ideas for publicity and how to, like, interest the press. That would have done it. You know, I'm inviting a sex offender into my home, and he's sharing a room with my son. I think that would get the press interested. However, I didn't do it because I live in a co-op of just 8 apartments, and 3 of them are really old ladies who only talk about how terrible all sex is. And I couldn't do it to them. And I felt bad because I thought that that's a really good idea. So if you know somebody else who wants to do that, just to highlight the fact that why are you not afraid? Because I don't see how this person could pose any threat to my child whatsoever. Just be wild and tell stories and be funny and highlight that 17-year-old, you know, beat it with a stick. Okay, yes.
These are a little less related, but if you want to give a stab at them, you can. Otherwise, we may save them for another time.
Okay.
Coordinating or organizing to get mass signatures, which isn't really, I don't know if that's something
I don't know. I mean, people sometimes start petitions that they then put on my site, you know, to like earlier this week, there was a woman who was arrested for letting her 9-year-old play in the park, and a lot of people have done things where they've started petition for her, and now they're raising money for her. Last count, it was $8,000 something. So people do that. I actually should know how to do it, and I don't. I know that people go to change.org and put up petitions. I don't know how they do the fundraising thing, but I'm sure somebody here does. Aren't you the person who knows?
I'm working on it.
Yeah, right. So ask Brenda. And how can you get the media to differentiate between murder, kidnapper, and sex offender? I think we have to keep explaining that there is a difference, and then keep highlighting what people are on the sex offender list for. And, you know, you can't sort of murder somebody, or I felt like that could have been a murder, or that reminded me of a murder, or whatever. There's murder, is murder, and sex offense is such an enormous span of things that get on there, including peeing in public, going to a prostitute, you know all this, streaking, that once you explain this to people, they realize there's a big difference. One thing that got one journalist interested when I was talking to him was, it was just a simple question. It's like, we have a sex offender list to keep communities safe. Is there a murderer's registry? You know, what if you're living next door to a murderer? You don't know that, but you know if you're living next door to a guy who peed in public. So he said, wow, I never thought about it. So just highlight the absurdities and the unfairness and all of your stories. You all have one. I was talking to you guys last night. I'm going to be talking to you all day today. I'll be here tomorrow. And the more stories we tell, Carrie Ramirez sent me her story. I put it on my site yesterday, wherever Carrie is. There she is. You know, people are moved by injustice, just as they're moved by injustice against children and crimes against children. They're moved by gross unfairness. They understand the 17-year-old was not doing anything wrong. I think they understand that Josh, by missing a deadline by a couple of days that he wasn't even aware of, was not the same as raping a child. So you just have to keep bringing these stories to people's awareness. And I do think that we're on the right direction. I'm really happy to be here. And tip your waitress. Thank you very much.